Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and I am joined today by Lauren Imparato. Now, Lauren has become revered as one of the globe's top entrepreneur experts, and she has spoken for audiences of 10,000 on the Great Lawn of Central Park, 2 to 3,000 each in Times Square, Madrid, Barcelona, Panama, opening weekend in Ibiza, Cannes Film Festival, and more. Lauren, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. I do want to begin, though. You were born in Northern or raised in Northern California?
Yep, born and raised in Northern California. That's right.
Wonderful, beautiful wine country out there.
Yes.
And I read that you have like a certificate in like wine something.
Yeah, actually, my one of my science projects in seventh grade, I studied the fermentation of grapes and the making of wine, and then went on to write my thesis at Princeton on the wine industries of Spain and Italy, and
Wow.
then took a lot of formal classes on wine, sort of after graduating, continuing that passion.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, my partner got into wines really seriously a few years back, and we ended up doing 2 trips to Napa and Sonoma. And he's become one of those guys that kind of swirls it around. You know what I mean? He
So
does the
I
swirl.
swirl and spill, so
Oh, yeah. I just sip it, honey. That's
yeah,
all
yeah,
I do. I don't
that's a
have time
better
for the
way.
swirl. And
Exactly.
and it's yeah, and a little funny little side note as well. When we were driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, we get smack dab in the middle, and Siri on our phone malfunctions and says turn left.
Oh,
So, which was like, girl, we're
I'm
on a
glad
bridge,
you
we
didn't
can't.
do that. I'm glad you didn't
Yeah,
follow those instructions.
no, yeah, she tried to kill us going to wine countries, but in any event, yeah. So you were raised in Northern California, then you go to Princeton,
Yeah.
and from there, I know you go to work on Wall Street, but I wasn't sure. Were you actually a trader?
I actually worked on the trading floor. So on the trading floor, it's broken up into sales and trading and research, and I was in sales. So I was on the trading
Mm.
floor in fixed income, which was really fun.
Was there, or were there many women in that role, or traditionally, are there many women in that
Not
role?
many. I think it's probably changed now, but back then I was usually the only woman or one of two women. So it was definitely, an oddball placement.
Yeah, yeah, and I asked that too because I think when we see that world on television or wherever, it's always like a bunch of like men, "Ah," and I don't, and so I'm like, I don't really think I've seen too many women in that environment. So,
No, it's
yeah,
definitely more rough and tumble. I think that my tomboy athletic self really, tended well to it.
yeah, you could hold your own in that
I
environment,
tried.
sure.
I tried.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know from that world though, that's when you leave eventually that world and you become an entrepreneur. You start your own business in the wellness space, and then you move on to where you are today. But I do want to know what was it that prompted you to say, you know what, I'm going to transition, take a different trajectory, and it's a kind of frightening thing to do when you sort of kind of going linearly, if you will, to one direction, and then you just change all of a sudden somewhere else. So, what made you make that decision?
I mean, it was definitely incredibly frightening. I had been studying yoga and meditation and nutrition on the side really as a hobby. Now they call it like a side hustle or whatever. For me, it was really just a hobby and it was something I did after work. And then I actually looked at the market and realized that there was not a wellness industry the way there is now. And I realized that if I wanted to turn this into a business, I had a very small window where I could do it, and it would make sense to leave my established career, and also make sense from an economic and market standpoint to really jump into something that didn't really exist then. But that said, it was really scary. I mean, the day I quit or the week I quit, you're leaving sort of. It felt like I was leaving all this behind. Now I really see it as just going from one step to the next step to the next step. But then it was, I had to make sure that I was set up for my new career and in a way that I would be successful and be able to support myself as well.
And it's a great point you bring up too, because very often the idea is that someone they leave a career or they quit one thing and then they go on to something else. But I think what is often overlooked is that like you just said, you were kind of going from point A to point B, and you were probably bringing a lot of things that you learn. I'm assuming that
Yes.
you learned to your new opportunity as an entrepreneur. Tell me about that
Absolutely.
correlation.
Well, first of all, I always say that people have this like romantic image of quitting their job and following their passion. I think that's a load of shit, for lack of a better
Mm,
phrase. Your
mm,
quote unquote passion, once it becomes your job, it's no longer your passion anymore. It's something that you have to do. So I always talk about not running away from something, but running towards something. So I actually loved my job on Wall Street. I was doing really well there. Um, I wasn't running away from it. I was running towards a new opportunity. And I think
mm.
that's something really important to consider when you do make these transitions. Are you running away or are you running towards something?
Yeah, that is so true because very often I see people sort of like they're not really following their passion as you speak. They're sort of just kind of existing. And then the whole idea about starting businesses, sometimes there's not even a passion in that. They're just trying to do something so they don't have to go to work for someone else. Right. And I think that's the trap too. Like that's not really going to solve your problem.
Exactly. And on that point, I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for my, nearly decade in corporate America. I think that taught me my time on Wall Street, taught me all these skills that I apply to my life as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's been a definite competitive advantage in the sense that there are, I think corporate world and Wall Street, as you noted earlier, would kind of get a bad rap. But I think there are some fundamental lessons that you learn that cannot be taught anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree. And people have to recognize that sometimes, you are bringing um, forth things that you've actually learned previously to apply elsewhere. I think that's a great point to make. So thank you for that. And also, I want to just go back to something you said about this sort of notion of, I'm going to start my own business and yeah, and it's all like great and fabulous for about 5 seconds until you get into the nitty gritty. And you talk about sort of dispelling the myths, if you will, of entrepreneurship
Yeah.
that the media and social media don't tell you about. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I mean, I think the way social media and media play entrepreneurship is like this great giant holiday. In reality, once you're an entrepreneur, if you're really, working at it, you're never going to take a sick day, a vacation day, or a paycheck for granted again. Money comes in and you cannot be there. I mean, even like your computer breaks, you can call IT and somebody fixes it for you. I remember my first, few years as an entrepreneur, something would be wrong with my computer, and not to be a stereotypical woman, but I'd like have no idea how to fix it. I'd hit it, smack it. How do you make the printer connect? It's like a nightmare. And I think that because of this romanticized idea of entrepreneurship, I think that we're really doing an injustice. Entrepreneurship is really hard work. It depends what type of entrepreneur you want to do, but it's a 7 day a week, full time, all mind consuming job. And it's not for everybody, and that's not a bad thing. It definitely works for me because I can wake up in the morning and set my own discipline to get things done, you know, but you have to be able to get things done and you have to be able to be your own boss. And ultimately, your clients become your boss, and so it's not like you're working for nobody, which I think a lot of people think happens when you quote unquote quit your corporate job and move on.
Yeah, I love that because in fact, it's the opposite. Like you're
Yeah,
working for probably like the most difficult or the most, I think, sort of like maybe the most contentious boss employee relationship you're ever going to be
yes,
in,
absolutely.
which is yourself. And if you don't produce, you don't
Exactly.
eat.
Yeah,
It
you don't
reminds me
eat, you
of
can't pay the rent.
freelancing.
Yeah, exactly. And you're always hunting the next thing.
Oh, yeah, freelance work is so grueling. I did it for 3 years, and I thought, the whole, just like you said, I was like, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to be great. And I spent most of my time, tracking down money for jobs I did do, where the client was like, "Well, I have 90 days to pay you." I'm like, "Yeah, but why would you?"
It's exhausting, right?
Right? Like, why did you
It's
just?
very difficult, and I think
Yeah.
we never talk about these realities of entrepreneurship. We always try and I don't know, we try and make it glossy and easy, with the Instagram
Yeah.
photos and the TikToks, and there's actually the reality of something totally different.
Yeah, and it's funny too. It reminds me of one of my freelance gigs. I was so excited because Victoria's Secret wanted to hire some men to get a male perspective on their catalog.
Amazing.
And so I did this great work. It was really a fun, progressive idea, and it took me like almost 6 months to get, not very
I've
lot
been
of
in that
money.
ship so many times.
And I'm like, "You're Victoria's
Yeah.
Secret," and they got a little indignant. And I guess I'm calling them out a little bit because they actually that same year had the fashion show with like Heidi Klum in $1 million bra with diamonds on it.
I'm with you.
Like that's where my money went. So anyway, that's pretty much where I think the my freelance money went.
I hear you.
But no, I definitely think that yeah, it's a great thing that you have tapped into about the seriousness of you have to be the one to deliver, and it's not for the faint of heart in that respect.
No, especially when you have people depending on you. Like, for instance, to your point, many, 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 many times, almost all my contracts would be paid quite late. But then you have to pay your team, and unless you're really flush, like that money is like a trickle down effect, and that adds stress. If you're trying to be a serious business.
And also, you are the co-founder and CEO of the Association, which is a women's leadership organization, and Women in Innovation is another group as well. And these are obviously pro-women organizations that help women thrive in business and innovation. But you also talk about a very different dynamic, which is why women offer or often hinder the success of other women in the workplace. And you have an idea on how maybe to change that. So talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Well, this is definitely something that I could potentially be raked over the coals for. But in my experience, women often hold women back um, as much, if not more, than men. And I'm not quite sure why that happens. In all senses, in my experience, I've had a series of sort of women that have held me back in my careers and my jobs. And I think that I call it the woman versus woman myth, and I think that oftentimes, they call it the queen bee syndrome, that the women feel like there can only be one queen bee, or women say that they fought so hard, so every other woman younger than them or after them has to fight equally as hard. I just think that women need to stay accountable to their word. When a dude says it's done, most often it's done. A woman says a hug and a kiss, and there's this pretense that women have to be nice and flowery and whatnot, and a dude will just say absolutely not, be much more point blank. Yes, no, I hate it, I love it. A woman kind of packages the whole thing, and in that packaging, often it's hindering a woman's success and advancement to the next level.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the queen bee syndrome because when I was reading this about some of the things you speak about, this particular topic was very similar to within the African American community. We have a similar thing we call crabs in a barrel, and it is this idea that one of us gets in and we haven't necessarily because we've climbed on top of the other to get there,
Hmm.
and there's it's often only allowed to be one or two of us
Hmm.
in that space, right?
Yep.
And for Black women it's even a bigger
Right.
dynamic.
Right.
So I completely see that syndrome, and I think luckily though what's great about it, because we're talking about it obviously, and you have these two organizations that are doing something about it. So tell me in which ways we're countering that dynamic for women.
Well, at the association, the number one thing we do is we really strive to be not about complaining and not about whining. So, in my experience, and most of the members of the association, our experience in women's groups has been a lot of complaining and a lot of whining. Here we
Mm,
say, okay, no, we are just individuals. We happen to be women for this organization, but we are individuals striving to do our best in our career and to get ahead. So we
yeah.
come together as individuals, and we have a strategy for how to advance and discuss our problems without complaining about our whining, but really much more pragmatic about it. And it's that
Hmm.
sort of pragmatism. I can't even get the word out. It's going to be practical
Yeah.
about problem solving that I think really helps the association, and it really sets us aside from other women's organizations out there.
Yeah. And it's funny because you tap into these two things that are almost stereotypical. So it's funny hearing a woman say them like, no whining
Yeah.
and no complaining, which are sort of like these tropes that you would hear. I mean, from a
Oh my
different,
gosh.
obviously from a different dynamic with men saying it, but,
I can
but
say
it's
it and not get in
interesting.
trouble. Well, I'm probably still going to get
Right.
in trouble, but I'm speaking from my experience. In my experience, most women's groups I've been a part of is just an endless waste of time and complaining and whining. And we know the association, we've created something different, and our members feel that it's totally different than the other groups because we really try
Mm,
and curtail that.
right. So it's about being, yeah, not coming together as a group to complain about the problem. It's about let's
Problem
resolve the
solve.
problem and make
Exactly.
opportunities.
Exactly. The women come together. We create what we call your personal board of directors. So we curate these groups of 6 to 10 women using a combination of data science and a personal touch, and that's your board. And you meet with your board once a month, and that monthly meeting follows a very strict timeline protocol. So quite frankly, in the essence of time, there's no chance to whine or complain. You have 2 minutes to discuss this, 1 minute to discuss that, and then the way we've set up our secret sauce or our structure is that we allow for what we call a diversity of thought. So every person comes in there and they share, something that's related to whatever that challenge or opportunity being discussed is. And so there's not,
Hmm.
if you whine, then really nobody gets anything out of it. And I think that becomes very apparent.
Did it feel like I don't want to say mission, but were you compelled as a woman yourself to really be that proactive, or was this something sort of people came to you and said, this is a need we have to fulfill? Or did you find that need and go, you know what, I need to do this for other women?
It's actually a really funny question. I actually generally hate women's groups because I find them to be a lot of platitudes and waste of time. You go, you drink some really bad warm Chardonnay in a cup, and all these senior women tell you they're going to help you and support you, and then they never answer your email. And if you're lucky, you have a coffee once. And when I was transitioning from my first business, IMU, to where I am now, I really felt like I lacked a group of colleagues that I could bounce my challenges and opportunities off of, a group that was unbiased. As much as your family, your husband, your partners, your friends, they love you and they want the best for you, they're inherently biased. They see things through a certain lens, and that might not be the best lens for your next step in your career. And this was something that I was swirling around about once I exited IMU, and really didn't know what to do about it. And then my co-founder, Janelle Hallier, and I met, and she, said that she was in a very famous global organization called YPO, and it didn't work for her as a woman the same way it worked for men. And she asked if I would be on her own personal board of directors that she was creating on the side. And I told her, well, no, I cannot be on yours because we're going to go turn this into a business. And that's how we arrived at the association.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love there's a couple great nuggets there that you just addressed. One is you have to be a catalyst for real change and put the work in, not just talk about something. And so I love that you've what you said there because another guest I had on the show, she's African American woman who's at Twitter, and she's in a really prominent role there. And she did the same thing by creating this brand called Sisters in Media,
Hmm.
and she didn't want young black women or women of color in general to have to go through that same thing that you just almost said, trying to find a mentor that was a woman who understood the dynamics, who was really going to help her and pull some strings. And it was she had the same problems based on many of the same things you addressed. She didn't find real tangible help, so she started her own. And I think that's a metaphor for all of us to
Yeah,
like be proactive
to be
and
proactive,
start.
exactly, and to not just sit back. I mean, it's really easy to retweet a meme. It's hard to actually do something on the ground about it.
Thank you so much for your insight today, Lauren Imparato. We really appreciate having you here today on Motivational Mondays. Thank you for your time.